Hi everybody, welcome back to the Tai Chi Code. In this video, I'm going to be taking a quick detour from my series on the Tai Chi Yang Style 24 form, and I'm going to go through the Tai Chi energy of pluck. And I'm going to do this so I can give a little bit of explanation of what the Tai Chi Code is in the context of some movements that if you're already practicing Tai Chi, you will already recognize. So the movements I'm going to go through here are all going to use the pluck energy. But if we understand Tai Chi in the usual way, pluck energy is very vague. Like the energy that would pluck something off of a branch, like a piece of fruit off a branch is going to be a pluck energy or a pulling down energy. But what does that translate to when we're talking about what our body's doing for real and how we can recognize all of the versions of pluck within the Tai Chi forms? If we only understand it as that actual plucking motion, we don't really understand what the core is doing, and we cannot connect it to the Tai Chi Trigrams, which are the foundation of Tai Chi theory. So I'm going to explain the Tai Chi Code interpretation of the trigrams here, and I refer to the Tai Chi Code core mechanics as they correlate with the Tai Chi trigrams. I call those the core techniques. So we're going to go through the Tai Chi energy of pluck, and what I'm going to show is the core technique of pluck, which is my interpretation of the body mechanics. In pluck, what we see if we look at the trigram is two solid lines and one broken line. What I will assert is that top solid line is the energy of hip extension, meaning we are pushing the body off the ground with our glutes. That is a yang energy. And then we have the second line. The second line is also going to be yang, unbroken. That represents the upper waist turning against the extending hip. Because if we turn our body towards an extending hip, it causes a projection of energy outward, as opposed to turning the upper body towards a flexing hip, which creates a rotation inward. So when we turn towards an extending hip, we get a yang energy. And then the third line in pluck is going to be a broken yin line. That represents the lower abdominal rotation, which is going to turn away from the extending hip. So just like the upper waist turning towards the extending hip causes projection of energy out, if you turn away from the extending hip, it turns that into more of a yin movement. So if I were to turn all of the waist muscles towards the extending hip, I get three solid lines, which would be ward off. When I do pluck, I'm taking the lower abs and turning it away, and that is creating pluck. So I have a broken line at the bottom representing the lower abs, which are going from here, ward off, turning away, which we can recognize from single whip. That is pluck. We use pluck also in just our daily life. If you're a kickboxer and you're going to do a jab, that is pluck. I'm not going to explain push, but that is a push. The core waist muscles are active on the opposite side in push as opposed to pluck. So in the Tai Chi forms, where are we going to see pluck? And keep in mind, everything has a setup that is going to entail multiple different energies being used to get you into the final position to create the technique. So each movement is a technique of its own, but then when we finish off the movement, we're going to see one final energy, and that's where we're going to be seeing pluck in the way I'm demonstrating this here. The first one is going to be single whip. So in single whip, we shift forward and then we push the palm out. That is pluck. When I shift forward, I'm flexing my rear hip. That's powering this motion. I have my upper waist turning towards the flexing hip, lower waist turning away from the flexing hip. That actually is split. So I'm shifting forward using split. And then as soon as I extend my right hip, I've turned split into pluck. And that creates the final position in single whip. When we originally go into single whip, we are also going to be seeing pluck used. If I'm doing it from here, from grasp the sparrow's tail, and I turn around, as I shift back and create this crane's beak, which is a plucking action, that is using pluck. I've turned around, and then now I'm going to extend my left hip, and I'm going to turn the upper body against it. And that is creating this folding action of the hand. It's not just random. The lower abs are turning away from the extending hip, and that's why this is pluck. So if you take your belly button, turn it to the right, upper waist, turn it to the left as you're extending the left hip. That is the initial pluck. And then we step up, and then we can pluck the hand out in this fashion before we step out. That again is pluck. I'm going to extend my left hip as I turn the upper body to the left and the lower body to the right. And that is the motion it creates. See the hip extension? I'm turning against it with the upper body, turning away from it with the lower body. That projects my crane's beak out like this. Then I step out, shift like I did earlier in split, and then create pluck again. Another place that we will see pluck is in high pat on horse. And we can do that coming out of single whip. We're going to shift back, and shift into empty stance. And then I'm going to perform pluck here. I'm again extending the left hip. You can see this looks very similar to what I just did before as I plucked out this way. But from this orientation that I'm in, the pluck occurs this way. My belly button's going back to the right, away from the extending hip. As I do this, my right side of the hand projects outward in high pat on horse. That is pluck. We'll also see a very similar movement, which you'll now be able to recognize from this position. If I do the same thing, we're doing pickup needles at C bottom. I'm extending my left hip again, turning the belly button away from that and the upper waist towards it, creating pickup needles at C bottom. They're all the same movement. Now, using pluck in a preparatory sense, there's two movements in the forms that we use that in. One of them is going to be when we step out to left ward off and do ward off in this fashion. The very first motion is pluck. And then I turn the lower abs from left to right, and that finishes off the ward off. Of course, they occur in what is seemingly one movement, like that, but the first part is pluck. The second part is ward off. We also use pluck in play the fiddle, extending the left hip as I turn the upper body towards it, lower body away from it. Play the fiddle, that is pluck. In Fair Lady Works the Shuttle, we begin with pluck and then transition pluck to push, changing the core rotation from the left side to the right side, all against the extending right hip. That's pluck, push. That occurs in one transition, but it's two separate movements. We also will see the same transition moving backwards when we do repulse monkey. As I step back, I'm doing pluck, followed by push. But I'm going off the extending forward hip, moving me backwards. From this position here, pluck, followed by push. So we can see that the pluck energy is present all throughout the forms, but we don't recognize them as such if we don't have a system for understanding how the core body movements correlate with the trigrams and the names of those 8 energies. That is the purpose of the Tai Chi Code, drawing that correlation. And I'm going to do that as I go through the Tai Chi Yang Style 24 form, and eventually I will get to the 108 form and show you all of the movements step by step, which energies are going on throughout the whole 108 form. If you follow my lessons, I believe that even if this is not something accepted by most Tai Chi instructors, you will see the truth in it because it will be obvious on its face. You will see how the core movements correlate with the trigrams and with the energies, and that should help your practice no matter who you're learning from. And so I hope you do follow these videos, subscribe to the channel if you're interested in more of this, and of course go ahead and click the like button if you got value from this lesson. I will see you in the next one.